For almost 6.5 years now, I've asked this question, who is Barack Obama? Please say good morning. Welcome back to the show. Carl Gallups is with us. First of all, Mr. Gallups, thanks, or Pastor Gallups, thanks for doing this, and welcome back to 710. Actually, the last time we spoke, I was working another radio station, but welcome to 710 KNUS, and good morning.
Hey, listen, thank you, Peter. What an honor to be on with you, and thank you for your respect, but you can just call me Carl. God bless you, man.
Well, you too. Thank you, sir. So people get a sense of who you are. And again, there are so many people now that have come into the fray, if you would, into the fight. We had Don Fredericks with us, and I know you know Don this week, and
yes.
He's the guy that does what I was kidding called the coincidences or the coinkadinks.
Right.
I'll tell you something, we had 75,000 plus hits on our website of people looking at the Obama, what people call the lack of bona fides. And so,
yeah.
First of all, a little bit about yourself, and then how you got into this fight as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm a 27-year senior pastor of a church here on the Gulf Coast, and prior to that, I spent 10 years in Florida law enforcement, also the founder of the ppsimmons News and Ministry Network, and also the host of Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. I've been a radio talk show host for about 12, 13 years now. And because of the miracle of Internet, like you have, we now have a large national and international audience to the radio program. So I said all of that to say that that's how I first got interested in this. I mean, when Barack Obama was running, listen, I listen to your show a lot, Peter, and you have yet to say anything that I disagree with, and I tell very few people that.
Yeah.
But I've heard you say, listen, your story is almost identical to mine in this. When I was on the air, when a caller called when Obama was running and said, listen, you do know this guy doesn't have a U.S. birth certificate, don't you? And I said, no, I've not heard that. And they went off on how he wasn't a U.S. citizen. And I told the caller, I said, I hear you, and I'm going to investigate that, but I have a hard time believing that. I can't believe that our system would allow a non-U.S. citizen to be running for president. I said, I highly doubt it. So, I didn't start as a birther. But anyway, after doing some investigation on my own as a radio talk show host and somewhat of a media person back then, I just kept running into this wall of possibilities that, as a matter of fact, he didn't have bona fide credentials. And so I started speaking to those possibilities, and what I like to remind my audience, Peter, and I've heard you talk about it, is, look, the first birthers were Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. I mean,
that's right.
Barack Obama's own publicist. Now, whether or not they were just using a publicist ploy, I don't know, but for 16, 17 years, his publicist proclaimed he was born in Kenya. I happen to be blessed. I'm a best-selling author of 2 books. I know my biographical information has to be turned into my publishers, and they have to verify it, and I have to sign off on it. I can't imagine for 17 years that his publishers and Obama himself didn't catch that so-called mistake saying he was born in Kenya. And then, of course, when the campaign started, Hillary Clinton is the first person to bring up the fact that he did not have credentials and he was not a U.S. citizen. And Chris Matthews on Hardball, he's on record. I've got the records from the Internet where he talks about this. He verifies that Hillary Clinton made those claims. Yeah. So that's where all of this started, and that was fuel for the fire for me to do my, investigative research. Well, in the meantime, I, of course, watched the Arpaio investigation unfold and watched Mike Zullo and Arpaio on the Internet and through the press conferences they did and the release of their first information several years ago, 3 years ago, I think now. And so I started trying to book Arpaio and Zullo on my show, just as you have done and as you would do. And I finally got Mike Zullo to come on my show. And we just hit it off. I mean, I found him to be very credible, very professional. The fact that I had been in law enforcement for so long, we talked off air, and we developed a friendship. He discovered my background, and before long, we were just talking, and he was coming on my show a lot because he had found through my show and the ppsimmons Ministry News and Network that he had a place where he could, release information, and it would be handled properly. So that's where it all began. But in the meantime, Peter, for the last several years, Mike Zullo and I now speak on the phone, literally, without any exaggeration at all, practically every day. sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 30 to 40 minutes, as he keeps me abreast of what's happening. And a couple of years ago, he asked me if I would attend the CPAC in Washington, D.C. with him. He knew that I had some direct congressional contacts in Washington, D.C., and he wanted to get into some of those offices. He had some contacts. So I met him in Washington, and that was the first time we had been together personally. But we were there for 3 or 4 days, and we were in and out of Capitol Hill and some congressional offices and meeting with congressmen, explaining to them at that time what he had and the new information that he had. So that's who I am, and that's my relationship with ZULLO. In the meantime, I'm not an official spokesperson for him. He doesn't send me out on duties, but because I deal with this so much on my radio program, like you do, and because I have him on quite frequently, I know an awful lot about what he knows, and I clear with him what I have permission to reveal publicly and what I don't. And so I'm interviewed from coast to coast quite often on this topic.
So I like to begin when I've made this question that I actually have folders and folders and folders full of questions and information and background research on Barack Obama, because I really do believe, and like I said, like so many of us, that in the early days of this, Jerry Corsi, yourself, ZULLO, there's a list of people that I always bring up who just had the wherewithal, if you would, or the rocks, people call it, the stones, to stand up and say, wait a minute, stop.
Right.
And I say this all the time, and I go back to guys like Phil Berg and people that you respect and people that I know that you work with, who, I mean, immediately we were racist, immediately we were Klansmen, we were this, we were that. You know what? And I've now taken pride in that's the best that they had. We have a up on my website this morning, or our website. I don't do it. Mark does it. And I swear to God, somebody sent me this, and I'd love for you to have it as well if you get a moment during a break or tonight or something, to look at the website, 710knus.com. And I call it the self-portrait, and folks can have it. And let me ask, I'll just run it by you, and then I got the questions. So okay. It said, what did you call me, ? I'm now a racist for criticizing Obama. I'm a terrorist because I want to protect my Second Amendment rights. I'm a teabagger for supporting the Constitution. I'm a national security threat because I speak my mind. I'm a troublemaker for asking unanswered questions. I'm a birther because I dare question the documentation of the president. I'm a traitor for exposing the corruption. I'm a conspiracy theorist for presenting documented facts. I'm anti-American for not towing the party line. I'm a warmonger. I'm a greedy capitalist because I believe I'm entitled to what I've earned. Guilty as charged and proud of it. So what?
Yeah, Peter, that's brilliant.
I'm
telling you.
It's not mine. I wish I had come up with that, but it was sent to me. It's on the website, but the stuff that I said is, and then I gave it to Mr. Crowley last night. He said, hey, Peter, is that a self-portrait? And I went, oh, my God. But the first question, I'm a racist for criticizing Barack Obama.
That's right. Yeah, well, and one thing I'd like to point out to your audience, and I'm sure you've done this before as well, but the word conspiracy theorist, they love to throw that around. I mean, that term was kind of invented, I think, by the government back during the Kennedy assassination days.
Sure.
But listen, look, 10 years I spent in Florida law enforcement, many of those years with 2 different sheriff's offices. I did some of my own criminal investigations, field officer, deputy sheriff, etc. Listen, here's what I know. Almost all crimes begin with a conspiracy.
Sure.
Okay? Yeah. And a good law enforcement officer develops a theory about that conspiracy.
Of course.
So a good law enforcement officer is a conspiracy theorist. Now, to take it a step further, after the theory is developed, you investigate it with forensics and gathering evidence, et cetera, and then you come to a legal conclusion. Is there a case or not? If there's not, you throw it out and do what you do with it. So I'm like you. I take honor when people call me a conspiracy theorist on something that's as monumental as this. It goes directly to the Constitution and the Commander-in-Chief and the red button.
I say to people, why is there a RICO Act if there's no conspiracy?
Right.
RICO is, racketeering and corrupt organizations, and people, the RICO Act is about conspiracy. And
exactly.
I mean, I'm over it. But I like to do this with people like you that I respect. And this is the truth, you guys. The president refuses to provide the media with anybody. It's school records, passports, college thesis, law, school. So I'll just write down the line. Do we have the original birth certificate of Barack Obama?
Okay, you're asking me that
Yes,
now,
sir.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yes or no?
No, we do not have the original birth certificate of Barack Obama. I don't think anyone has it that I know of, unless it's buried somewhere in the archives in Hawaii.
Do we have the Obama-Dunham marriage license?
The original, not that.
There
not
isn't
that
one.
I'm,
There isn't one.
No, not that I'm aware of.
I mean, these are. I don't mean to be abrupt, but these are yeses and nos because it works so much better. Do we have the Saturo-Dunham marriage license? No.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Saturo adoption records?
No, not that I'm aware of.
The Basuki School, which was in Jakarta, do we have that application?
Not that I'm aware of.
Panahu school records? Or
No.
Selective service registration? No.
Well, there's been some research done on it, but nothing in the way of a verified original that I'm aware of.
Occidental college records?
No.
Passport to Pakistani records?
No.
Columbia College?
No. Yeah, I see where this is going, Peter.
Columbia thesis?
No.
Harvard?
Yeah, no.
Harvard Law Review?
No. That's all.
Baptism certificates?
No.
Here now it gets good. Medical records?
Yeah, no.
I mean,
they've got our medical records, but we don't have his. Yeah.
We have none. How about even Illinois Senate records? No.
Not that I'm aware of.
Law practice client list?
No.
I mean, it gets esoteric and it gets minutia, but the point of it is we know nothing. We know more about Rutherford B. Hayes.
Oh yeah.
Than we know about Barack Hussein Obama.
Well, listen, of course, you're aware of the congressional research document that went around a couple of years ago that was leaked and is all over the internet that admits that even the Congressional Research Service admitted that, look, he was never vetted by anyone. But they went on to try to to cover that up by saying, however, for office of president, there really is no set way for this to happen. There is no governmental process. Now, I take issue with that. The Constitution says that Congress is responsible for vetting the identity or the eligibility of a president during the election process, when the electoral college process. I'm sorry, those were the words I was scrambling for. The electoral college process. The Constitution says that they have to vet the eligibility, and twice now they have refused to do that on this president. However, as you know, they ran a Senate investigation on the eligibility of John McCain and passed a resolution 511.
Sure, they did.
Yeah.
Our guest, if you just joined us, again, it is part of this ever-growing circle of people who, I suspect, like many of you in the audience, have no fill-in-the-blank idea who Barack Obama is. He's a pastor, former law enforcement officer. His name is Carl Gallups. He's been with us before. Carl will be on the show as well. Having said all those things, when, like I said, I got 6.5 years on the job and on this job, and trying to understand the history regarding Obama's timeline prior to even service as senator from Illinois. And if you take your search machines and you do all this stuff and Google search engines, you can't find anything. You can find nothing. And these guys have shown up. We have been joined by Don Frederick. Now, of course, we're joined by Carl and by so many other people. And the radio shows like his has become sort of this pneumatic tube system for these people. But you find, and again, this Don Frederick guy who's coming back on next week, what a home run. I mean, he finds these, we've been calling them coincidences or coinkydinks. And everybody's repetitive. Everybody's linked between the Valerie Jarretts and Michelle LaVaughn Robinson, now, of course, Mrs. Obama, and Bernadine Dohrn, and William Ayers, and Thomas Ayers, and Frank Marshall Davis, and these characters show up. That's not a coincidence, is it, sir?
Well, perhaps not, but two things, and of course you're the host, but I think what I'm going to say plugs into where you're going with this. Along those lines, two things that I would love to share with your audience, and that is the difference between coincidences and speculations and evidence. And there's a big difference, and that's very important in this investigation. And also, I'd like to share with you and your audience the very latest. I mean, where ZULLO is. I mean, I talked with him yesterday for an hour, and I can share with you exactly what's happening with this case and where it has gone and where it is going and what the future plans are, if you would like. But no, you're right.
That's why you're here. I mean, that's why you're here.
Okay. Well, where do you want me to go first?
I'll begin, as they said in Alice in Wonderland at the beginning. What would you like to tell us? And first of all, tell the audience, if you would please, who don't know, who exactly Mike ZULLO is.
Okay, Mike ZULLO works directly under Sheriff Joe Arpaio and the auspices of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. He was the commander of the cold case posse. And the word posse, I know on the eastern seaboard it doesn't play very well, but in Denver and in northwest Florida where I'm from and westward, we understand that word. But it's an investigative team. It's a constitutional office or team that the sheriffs are allowed to put together a panel of whoever they deem to be experts to help solve crimes. He was the commander of the cold case posse, or is the commander of the cold case posse, and answers only to and directly to Sheriff Joe Arpaio. That's who Mike ZULLO is.
And I think I know some of these answers, but when and why did Sheriff Joe and, again, the same question, and Mike decide to do what they're doing?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. People ask it often, and it's very important that your listeners understand this. Sheriff Joe Arpaio was in the process. He's I think a 5 or 6 term sheriff now of Maricopa County, one of the largest sheriff's offices in the entire United States. Prior to that, he was in federal law enforcement for 30 years. This is a 55-year man, law enforcement man. But he was running for office and was going to various, campaign meetings and Tea Party meetings, which was really popular back then. And he kept getting hit with right during the time he was doing this, Obama had just released his, quote, long-form birth certificate, and that was on the Internet, and people had already pulled it down and were running their analysis. I mean, digital experts and so-called digital experts and self-proclaimed experts. And people were, screaming, this is a fake. It's a forgery. It's a cheap, sorry fake. Yeah. And so while he's running for office, Tea Party, that's all they wanted to talk about, and Arpaio was really rather aggravated. Now, what I'm telling your audience, Sheriff Arpaio has said publicly, so so finally he just kept saying, look, I don't want to talk about this birth certificate. I want to talk about Maricopa County politics and law enforcement. I'm running for sheriff. Ask me those questions. Don't ask me about the president's identity. But finally, he was presented with a petition with 250 signatures, voters in his county saying, look, you need to investigate at least at the Maricopa County level because we might have been defrauded in the last election if this man does this, if he doesn't have U.S. citizenship, if his birth certificate is fake and fraudulent, then he was on the ballot here and we want to know. So this is what happened. Now, this is fascinating. Sheriff Arpaio got his cold case posse together, got Mike ZULLO, put him as commander, and this was his instruction. Arpaio has said this publicly, and ZULLO has said this publicly. He said to Mike ZULLO, Mike, I want to be the man that exonerates Barack Obama in this birther issue. He says, he was like you and like me. He said, I can't imagine that that our system would allow a president to be in office and commander-in-chief with his finger on the red button who's not even from this country. He says, I want to settle this once and for all. I want you guys to get that birth certificate off the Internet. I want you to examine it. I want the results back, and I want to exonerate him. Mike ZULLO has admitted on the air back in the early days. He was like you and me. Mike couldn't believe that was possible. Mike said, yes, Sheriff, we'll take care of it. This shouldn't take long at all. So several people on the cold case posse voted for Obama. They were big Obama supporters. They've been public on that. So they sat down to do their investigation, and I don't remember exactly how long it took now. I'm just going to say several days, if I can be corrected by ZULLO, of course. But several days later, after running some of the initial forensics on it with experts, they determined that what was on the Internet had a great possibility of being a fabrication, a forgery. And so, so they got back with the sheriff and said, Sheriff, sit down. You're not going to like what we're going to tell you. That we cannot exonerate him. This is a forgery, and they started showing him the evidence.
Let me do this, if I may interrupt. I need to take a pause here. This is our first pause break, and we'll continue because
thank you.
I've talked to Sheriff Joe. I've actually met Sheriff Joe a couple of times, and we've had a little two times private conversations on what he believes, and Mike's been the man. Before we take I always say this, and when we talk about this for people to let this impact them. First of all, Barack Obama could not pass E-Verify.
No, he could not.
Number two, you or I or anyone else has to give the government more information, more personal information to sign up for Obamacare
Oh, yeah.
than the president provided to become president of the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Those are stunning statements.
This Bill O'Reilly has gone public saying that all he needs is the fact that there were announcements in a newspaper.
Oh, he's an idiot.
Well, I know, sure he's an idiot. How about you and me, Peter? How about us taking our newspaper birth announcements and trying to get a driver's license?
But of course not. But my point of it is, did you notice at Super Bowl halftime who got the Obama live interview?
Yeah, of course.
Bill O'Reilly.
Of course.
I mean, listen, I knew O'Reilly. O'Reilly he worked here as Bill Riley before he became Bill O'Reilly. And believe me, brother, someday we'll meet and we'll talk. Hang on.
Okay.
This guy's great. Again, this is Carl Gallups, Mike Zullo's life, Mike Zullo and the life of Barack Obama. But just let it sink in. To sign up for Obamacare, you got to give the government more personal information than Obama had to provide to become president of the United States. He could not pass E-Verify to get a job in McDonald's. Our guest is super. We talk again. Find these people who are questing after who is Barack Obama. On the line with us is Pastor Carl Gallups. You know, one of the questions that I have before we go further is, and why haven't the cold case guys, I know they have done a lot of things privately, and I mentioned I've spoken a couple of times with Sheriff Joe, but people always ask, well, where's that announcement? When is it coming? And what is it that they know? How about if I turn it over to you there, Carl, if you would?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, I do, and in doing so, I can just, as I said, two things I wanted to address is evidence versus speculation, and then where are we now? And that kind of that will begin answering the question you just asked. Here's the deal. You know, of course, they did two press conferences before, and the mainstream media we're in the tank completely for Obama back in those days, and rather than looking at this monumental evidence they've already given, which was enough to spark a congressional investigation if they would have done it. But instead of doing that, they questioned Joe Arpaio. Well, what's your jurisdiction? You remember that?
Of course I do.
What jurisdiction do you have? Well, that wasn't even an appropriate question. But anyway, bottom line, since then, this investigation has gone deeper. It has gone darker. I will use that word in that the stuff they have uncovered, Mike Zullo is now calling earth-shattering, universe-shattering.
I know.
And so what happened, Peter, was about this time last year, Mike Zullo called me and said, Carl, look, it looks like we're going to be able to make a March conference, an announcement. And because their information was being wrapped up, it was being vetted, they were ready to come forward. But what happened, and this is why Zullo has not made any more announcements as to an exact date, because it kind of bit him a little bit, because he and Arpaio were both ready to go. March, 2014 was when they were going to do it. But they turned the corner to January, and monumental information began to come in. Monumental information. And they had to research it. It was information that could not be ignored. It was huge. It was deep and dark. And so once they started vetting it, Peter, they discovered that there was a lot of credibility to this, and it was the possibilities were staggering. I mean, history making. So they began to delve into this research. Now, this information came in as a result of Zullo's birth certificate investigation, but what happened? Some of the information spilled over into possible criminal activity in Maricopa County coming straight from the White House. Well, then Joe Arpaio said, wait just a daggone minute. And he opened up an entirely new investigation. So since the beginning of this year, Peter, we now have two investigations going. One of them is a criminal investigation being conducted basically by Joe Arpaio and whoever he assigns to it, regarding criminal activity in Maricopa County that seems to go directly to the White House. And Joe Arpaio has talked about this a little bit, even in the mainstream media when questioned. But the birth certificate investigation, and this is not really a birther case. The case is this document a forgery?
Yeah, right.
Who did it?
Right.
Why was it done? Why did the president feel compelled to present a fake birth certificate to the country? That's what this is about. So you've got these two investigations going. So as March closed in, they realized we're never going to make this March date because there's so much more traveling to do, people to talk to, more evidence to collect and vet. So March came and went, and people called Zullo a liar.
Well, sure did.
Yeah, but he hasn't lied about anything. These guys are professional law enforcement investigators. They're not politicians.
I understand that, and and my critique is, and we all know the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
And one day there will be a wolf, and
that's right.
And this, I mean, listen, I have enormous respect for both of those men, as you as well. The question I'm saying is, you especially with like the attackers, and we get them all the time. They wait for that. They won't deal. They won't deal with the the obvious questions. But it's more, as you know, in the politically correct, progressive world that people like you and the rest of us live in. It isn't about the questions or the answers. It's about you can personalize it to the individual. And
right.
And ZULLO has been. And I'm a fan of ZULLO's, huge fan of ZULLO's, huge fan of Sheriff Jones. But he's been, he gets pounded on because the guy they go wolf, wolf, and then there's no wolf. And so that's my criticism. And it's not a criticism in the sense of a criticism. It's that you got to stop doing it.
Well, let me speak to that. Mike ZULLO and Arpaio never set a hard date.
No, I know they did not.
So they didn't cry wolf. They said we're shooting for March 2014. Well, they didn't even have to say that. They didn't have to tell America anything.
I agree.
They don't have to do anything.
I agree.
They can throw this investigation in the toilet right now, and they're not accountable to anybody.
I agree.
So they didn't cry wolf. They shot for March 14, and as soon as they saw they couldn't do it, they started announcing it. And why? Because this investigation, and I want your audience to understand this. And again, I've got some exclusive information for your audience that Mike ZULLO gave me permission yesterday to share. So I will give that. But the point I'm trying to make, Peter, is that when this investigation turned this humongous corner, and I happen to know about 80% of what they know, so I mean it's huge. And when it did, they realized we're going to need some more months to vet this, to submit it to forensics, to do everything we need to do. Because here's the thing, Peter. When they do come forward, they're only going to get one shot at this.
That's right.
If they fumble this, Peter, it's over. And they know it. So they don't care. Mike ZULLO doesn't care what the bloggers say.
No, I mean, that's the world you have to live in. The critics be damned. But so what is it that you can say this morning?
Okay.
That would be
here's what I can say.
All right.
Here's what I can say, and then I'll give you this exclusive information too. All right. Talking with Mike ZULLO yesterday, here's what I can say. They're still hot and heavy. It's still going strong. They are going to do conferences. It will happen sooner rather than later. And they're not tied into any political process. People say, well, get it done before the November elections. Well, Mike ZULLO has already said, based upon the stuff they have, it's probably not going to happen before the November elections, and they don't care anything about the November elections. That's not their purpose here. So the bottom line, Mike ZULLO has been in Washington the last several weeks. He's made 5 trips to Washington. He's tying up some loose ends and bringing it all together. Arpaio has announced publicly that they're hot and heavy on the trail of who actually did this. And this is going to be some surprising, astounding information when it's all released.
If I may, this is what I'm hearing from the people that, that, as you know, there's a inner circle, if you would, of people that have been kind enough to include me in. And although Don Fredericks has danced with this as well, they think that they know, tell me if this is close, they think that they know who the forger is or was that made the birth certificate. Is that close?
Well, actually, yes, and Arpaio has said that publicly.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, yeah.
Yes, and based upon what I know, I can answer that yes.
Okay.
Now, here's the other thing, and I really want to make this point. This is huge. There's so much speculation out there, Peter, on blogs and internet postings and videos being made and even interviews being done on radio stations from coast to coast. And I listen to a lot of these interviews, and sometimes I just cringe when some of these so-called experts, and some of these guys I know and respect, and I've got relationships with them, but I listen to them get on the radio and speculate almost as though they have authority, as though they know, and they say things, and I'm talking to ZULLO daily, and I know that they're not only are they wrong, but they're way off base. And so people are just whipped into this frenzy of speculation, and people are out there demanding, look, we've got all this evidence, why don't we bring it forward? But let me just explain to your audience. evidence. I mean, I was a criminal investigator. I did this stuff. ZULLO's done this stuff. Arpaio, 50 years. Evidence is not speculation. Evidence is something that has to be.
Let me just, because we're close to a pause. What is the one thing that you hear people say in this investigation that isn't true? I mean, I listen to so many people say so many different things.
Well, oh gosh, I have to be very careful how I answer that. I think I can give you an example or two if you'll allow me to continue my vein of thought on evidence.
Yeah, but I'm close to a pause. But I mean, you made a statement. You said that people that you know and respect have said things that you know aren't true, and I know almost all of these guys, and there's a lot of lockstep thinking. Other people think different things.
Okay, well, for example, I'll just say this:
right.
There have been statements as to who fabricated or who manipulated the birth certificate. Mm-hmm. I hear a lot of people saying that it was the Department of Health director in Hawaii.
No, I've heard that. Okay. I've heard Valerie Jarrett. I've heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't her. It wasn't her.
The one that died. You're talking about Fuddy?
Yeah. It wasn't her.
Oh, I didn't think it was.
But yet there are people out there saying, and I've got permission. And I've got permission from ZULLO to say it wasn't her. But there are people out there who are insisting that it was her. But they don't know what ZULLO knows. They're wrong.
Okay.
But yet people.
But that's that everybody always speculated. I always thought it was some kid I called Jimmy down the hall that was politically correct and so had to come up with a race African. There is no designation. He's the only guy in the universe from Hawaii that has African as a race for anybody, mother, father, or himself. Right. So now that kind of stuff we know is nonsensical. And Fuddy dies, and people talked about Fuddy's death. But, I mean, real hardcore stuff that people, most of these people, in fairness, honest to God, Carl, I've met and spoken to probably every one of them that I think is worth their salt. And there's so much lockstep agreement that, obviously the birth certificate's fraudulent, but who made it? Obviously this isn't true. All these things are missing.
Well, ZULLO knows who made it.
All right, hang on. All right, that's close enough. If ZULLO knows, not believes, but knows.
Well, yeah, and I'm not at liberty to give all of the evidence and forensics,
no, I get that.
Yeah, I mean, and Arpaio has said this publicly.
Let me do this.
So yes.
All right, because of time, I'm going to take a pause and come back. And,
please, I've got so much more to share with you.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to do it next. We'll do it, wrap up here, and we'll have you back, say, Tuesday of this week or next week. But hang on just a second. A final couple of moments here with Carl Gallups, and then coming up Jeff Brown, and then Dr. Jane Orion on the virus. In all fairness, we have spoken for 45 minutes, and I haven't heard anything new or anything that says, and you and I are lockstep. This guy is hidden away so much, and I know that Joe Arpaio and I know that Mike ZULLO have been the tip of the spear, and I want to have you back on the show, but what is it that you would like to tell us in I realize it's a short amount of time, about Barack Obama and when anyone is ever going to know something, and the knowing and believing are two separate things, if you would.
Right. Well, Peter, you've asked me that several times, and my answer's the same. I mean, I can tell you what Mike ZULLO's telling me every day. I spoke with him yesterday.
And he said.
And I cannot, he is not setting any dates, and of course I cannot do that, but he is assuring me, and based upon all that I know that he knows, this is huge, and he's assuring me that they're in the final stages of jumping through all the legal hoops and the vetting process and the forensics. They're in the final stages now, and these news conferences are going to be held, and they're going to be held rather soon, and that's the only words I can use. But Mike ZULLO's not lying. He's not covering anything up. Arpaio's not. They're in the midst of a criminal investigation. This is not tabloid journalism. This is real stuff. It's as big as it gets. It goes all the way to the White House, and they've got one shot at it.
Would you come back next week, and we'll take the time again, and I know. I mean, my sense of ZULLO and my sense of Joe and other people is that there's an enormous amount of unknown information about this president, and ZULLO has been, he's been a brave guy, and Joe's been a brave guy.
Yes.
A lot of brave guys in this, because they went out after people's careers who would dare ask this question, and. So, and just to wrap it for today, you have the info, or part of the info. You believe that these guys do have the bomb.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Yes, they do.
All right, let me do this. Have you talk to Casey. We'll talk Monday or Tuesday this week. Thanks, Pastor.
Great.
Thank
you, Peter. You've been very gracious.
Very kind. Thank you. You too.
Hello, this is Carl Gallups. Just to let the listeners know, I have been rescheduled on the Peter Boyles Show out of KNUS, Denver, Colorado. I have been rescheduled for September the 23rd. That's Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I hope you'll listen to that interview as well. God bless you.